Hello there, Force of Will players, and welcome back to another video. Today, what we're going to be taking a look at is my top 10 favorite, what I think are like the best, have the most synergy, stuff like that, cards in the new set, Game of Gods Revolution. Now, normally how I've done these, if you've seen these in the past, you'll kind of already know, I tend to take cards that are more generic in how they play. I don't really... with the advent of Game of Gods, it became a lot harder to focus specifically on like general playability, where cards would be better in a wide variety of situations. And sometimes some cards will get in even if they're really only good for one specific archetype, just because of how powerful they are for that archetype. So that is normally how I do it. I'll go over my thoughts on the cards, why I have them in each location, as well as just like a brief overview as well. No, so normally, if you've seen my top 10s in the past, I normally will do like a pop-up over here on like my left, or a pop-up over here on my right, like things like that. However, I needed to get this video out today because I kind of put it off for a little bit, and I don't have enough time to go through that whole editing process, unfortunately. So what we're going to be doing is instead I just have them all picked, posted up in images, so I'll just be bringing them up one at a time as I talk about them this time. Okay, so starting off with number 10, we have Arena Expansion Mount Othris. So Mount Othris, it's typically just going to be a Typhon card. The main reasoning for it is for Force Resonance Infinity down here, right? When it becomes revealed from outside the game, you can just put it into play. So the effect of just putting it into play, very powerful, right? You don't have to pay anything for it, and it really works well with Typhon synergy. I mean, the machine stuff, right? Machine Resonators getting put into the grave, you get more machines, right? And then they get larger as well. The main thing that I want to look at though for it is the fact that Darkness Chants in your hand gain quick cast. It's been a really long time since we've had anything that really gives stuff in our hand quick cast. We've had specifically chants. We've had instances in the past like Unexpected Visitor has given it to Resonators. Most recently, Loki Enters the Game of God also gives it to Resonators. But the only thing that ever really gave chance quick cast that I can think of off the top of my head was Blue Planet, which was a really old card. It was like Blue Edition that had like Seal 7 cards in your hand getting quick cast. So it's been a while since we've been able to give Darkness Chance quick cast, or just cards quick cast, without with very little investment, right? So for Mount Othris, giving Darkness Chance quick cast specifically means you have a lot of instant speed discard. If you watched my Typhon list video from this Tuesday, you could see that I ran a whole bunch of discard, right? I ran Look of Corruption, I ran Glint of Insight, I ran Battle Comes to an End, and then you can run more options as well. You could put in Thought Control, you can put in Lapis's Darkstorm for like 2 discards, Darkness of Zeus, same kind of deal, right? Like you can run a whole bunch of that and do it at instant speed when your opponent's drawing cards, because Darkness Chants now have quick cast. It also allows Typhon to play stuff like Phantasmal Scarlet, which is basically almost a better Gradius in most cases. Final Battle becomes instant speed, very reminiscent of like Perfect Loki board wipes, kind of preventing your opponent from playing for a turn, specifically like Resonators and J Resonators. So it is just a very powerful effect in order to give those cards quick cast. Another side note with it is, I doubt this will ever happen, but if Sigurd ever comes off the ban list, Mount Othris is searchable off of Sigurd, because it is a 2 mana, or 2 CMC total cost, Darkness Edition. So those are all things to keep in mind with it. I doubt Sigurd will ever come off the ban list, but if it ever does, you could potentially have some kind of like control lists or things like that, maybe like Alice Origins Rezard, because it can play Sigurd fairly easily, that kind of use that as like a control shell. But that is why Mount Othris is in my number 10 slot. Coming in at number 9. Number 9, we have Echidna, Mechanized Monster. So 2 Typhon cards right off the bat. So I could have done a lot. I tried very hard to not put as many Typhon cards in here as possible, to also give other cards their limelight. But Echidna When Echidna was first spoiled, we didn't have a whole lot of Typhon cards. It was one of the more earlier cards spoiled for Typhon, but when it was spoiled, the first thing that I thought was no competitive Typhon deck will ever be able to go over 100 cards, right? Or like no Typhon deck would ever play 200 or things like that, because Echidna is just so strong. We saw it with Typhon's Wave of Terror, where it got basically E-banned, I guess, where you can't play Echidna and Typhon's Wave of Terror within the same deck because it just allowed you to make your opponent, in Typhon specifically, discard 7 cards right off the start of the game. If you had Energize, you could play Echidna, reveal 3 Typhon's Wave of Terrors, 2 off of Echidna, 1 off of Typhon. Your opponent would discard 7. In other rulers, like if you take a look at Odin, Loki, things like that, like other villains, you could still technically play 2 Typhon's Wave of Terrors in the sideboard, order Echidna, same thing, and make your opponent discard 4 before they even got to play their turn. So it was just too powerful of an interaction, specifically Echidna with those cards. But now, Typhon decks, well, actually, I think it's locked behind Force Resonance Infinity, the reveal, now that I think about it, on Typhon's Wave of Terror, so maybe they can't do it. But anyway, it still was just too powerful, specifically for Typhon decks and things like that. You pay 1 will before your opponent can do anything, and they can't play the game. So it just wasn't really fair, not a good way to play. The other thing that Echidna can do now is instead of Typhon's Wave of Terror, you just have Typhon Cells, which instead of making your opponent discard 7, now you can draw 7 cards. So Echidna still has that kind of impact. You can reveal like 2 Mount Othrises simultaneously as well. It gets you multiple machine tokens whenever a machine dies, multiple buffs, only 1 instance of darkness chance in your hand, have quick cast, but it's also kind of protection if your opponent's playing like Zeus, they search Apollon, Attendant of Asmodeus's, in other decks like that. So Echidna being able to just reveal multiple things is a very powerful effect for Typhon. It gets the deck rolling very quickly. Can reveal multiple Drywings, which gets you a whole bunch of will. So that is why Echidna takes the number 9 spot. Coming in at number 8. Number 8 is Artemis, the 5th Olympian. So Artemis, the interesting thing about the Olympians specifically is they all have their enter effects or on search enter effects. And the on search ones, you're really only going to... Actually, I think you're only going to see them in Zeus, because it's off of Order of the Olympians, which Zeus enters the game of gods is only treated as if you're Zeus, and only Zeus has. So you'll never actually get the reveal effects unless you're playing against Zeus, which means they're singleton. But you can, the interesting thing about the new 12 Olympian gods is you can play them for their Union 7 effects in like Mill or like Dark Tree, like other things like that. So playing stuff like Harvesting Season, Rune decks, again, like Dark Tree, like things like that cycle through your deck very quickly in order to activate Union 7. So Artemis's Union 7 is not as game-winning as some of the other ones for not Zeus. The main reasoning for it is it does kind of ramp you with stone, right? So Artemis allows you to, if you're at Union 7, you can recover up to 2 stones. You only pay 1 will for it. That's technically ramping up a will, right? Otherwise, she can destroy 2 things or more if they have flying, due to her destroy all J resonator with flying. The thing with Artemis in Zeus specifically, one is you get the reveal, so you can play a 1 mana order card, and then reveal search Artemis, recover 2 stones. The other thing is because of Zeus's stone, the 1, it allows you to play Artemis off of 1 stone, even if you're not at Union 7, so you can still kind of get that quasi mana ramp going on in Zeus, even though you're not at Union 7. Union 7 just makes it even easier for you to reach that point. The biggest thing with that is the turn you get Artemis, you go as long... In playtesting, whenever I have been playing Zeus, whenever I get to 2 stones, and one of them is at least the 1, it leads to a situation where I almost always try and search Artemis on my turn, because you want to keep searching with Zeus, right? Like to facilitate getting your new 12 Olympians. So if it's my turn, I'd make a point to try and search Artemis to reach a point where I ramp a bunch of will. So I can kind of play a turn, a very early, like mana ramped up turn, and then still have interaction going into my opponent's turn. And that is typically how it's been played in test hands and like other things like that, at least amongst the games I've played. So Artemis enabling that within Zeus is a very, very powerful effect of hers. I actually underrated her for a while. When I first made my top 10 when the set first released, Artemis was nowhere near there. She wasn't even in like my thought. But as I played more with the deck, she became like the main enabler of that deck being able to explode, like its explosive play lines and what it could actually do effectively. And so that is why Artemis is in the number 8 slot. Coming in at number 7, we got Regalia Beast. So you've probably seen Regalia Beast in, if you've seen my Wander Wednesday for Valentina 2.0, Overlord of the Seven Seas, something like that. It's the one that allows you to search for Regalia on its ruler side. So Regalia Beast does have the typing of Regalia, which makes it searchable in that sense. It also can act as any attribute. Even though you do have to pay a light will into it, it does act as any form of attributed Regalia, which makes it work very, very well with the Alice Origins rulers. Every single one of them. Rezard, Machina, Priscilla, Faria, right? Like if in my Faria list that I had done before this set release, we had Alice Enters the Game of Gods because it was a singular light will and you could get a light attribute Regalia token into play in order to proc Faria's effect on the front side. Regalia Beast can do the same thing for all of the other rulers. So Regalia Beast is kind of like a sorcery speed version of Alice Enters the Game of Gods. However, what Regalia Beast does is it also functions as a mana dork, right? So if I forget what like Rezard's one is. I think it's Darkness, but if I'm like Rezard, for example, and I play Regalia Beast and I choose Darkness, now I'm producing more Darkness will. So instead of Alice Enters the Game of Gods, which draws you a card off of producing that Regalia, now we just have something that helps us mana ramp. The other thing with Regalia Beast is even if it dies, you do also keep getting it back whenever you play non-resonator Regalia, so that includes any of the 0 mana Regalia, Horn of the Sacred Beasts, things like that, or like 2 mana Death Scythe if you're Rezard, 2 mana Excalibur. Like all those will also add Regalia Beast back to your hand, which is just more triggers of your front effect for the Alice Origins rulers. So Regalia Beast really amped up those deck strategies, in addition to also just helping Alice, the Order Alice ruler, or just other decks that might, like other Tails decks that might be trying to play like an IU Regalia type OTK line, because I believe they combination banned Alice and IU together. So just very powerful effect for all that. It also has the Beast typing, which is kind of interesting because that lets you play Perseus Call to Action on it for free to allow it to tap for 1 will immediately. So it's almost like a 0 will play. So like if you're Faria and you're playing Perseus Call to Action in it, you play Regalia Beast, you can draw a card or add a stranger, so the value, it plays for 0 value, it's now light, and then you can Perseus Call to Action draws a card, so you're still at the same card count, and then now Regalia Beast is just a free light will that you have access to. So just quite potent in those decks. So it opens up so much more design space to play around with those Alice Origins rulers. Coming in at number 6, Zhongliang. So Zhongliang got combination banned with a card before it was even released, Null Magic Stone. Null Magic Stone has tap, produce a Fire Will, and take 200 damage. So if you're playing Zhongliang and you activated that effect, you would get 2 Fire Will off of 1 stone. being tapped, and that can be done in any ruler as long as you could play the villain's typing. So the thing with Zhongliang is, even though that is combination banned, there's a lot that Zhongliang has going for it. One, it's just in Dragonflame, it just starts out as a 9/9 with swiftness and flying, which, I mean, pretty good. So it does have that going for it. The interesting thing about it, though, would be I'm fairly confident this works. But with how LKI works and everything like that, is if I were to order Zhongliang and put its enter on the chase to deal damage to its attack to me, and then it dies in response, because its attack at time would be registered as 900 or whatever my dragon power would be, I would just take whatever the total attack would be, which would be a shit ton of damage. So that's kind of funny, instead of just taking the 400. But the main thing with the Zhongliang, and why I have it on this list in the number 6 spot, is because or number 7, whichever spot I have this in, it works very, very well with like the old aggro Brunhild lists. So if you remember, I think this was back in 2019, I think. 2019 format, or like 2019 like time frame. There were decks that were kind of cropping up that were like Harvesting Season, Turbo. You would Einherjar summon out like a Blazer Thieves Gang Underling, or like a Valkyrie's Chosen, or like things like that. You'd play like March of the Dead's, other revival spells, and you would just play this like graveyard-centric beat-down aggro list. That was what Brunhild was doing. Zhongliang works very well within that strategy, partially because if you think about that deck, think about drawing one Zhongliang, right? You go first, you draw one Zhongliang in your opening hand. Not incredibly difficult. You Harvesting Season, you call a stone, you produce whatever will, you Harvesting Season. Harvesting Season will mill your top 10, and then if you mill a Zhongliang, you can Einherjar summon back Zhongliang into play. You take 400, you produce a red. You play the Zhongliang from your hand, and now you take another 400, so you're at 32, but now you have 2 red will. And then if you have any other things like that, Two-Horned Almirage is a 5/5 beast that costs 1 red. You deal 500 damage to yourself. That's a mana ramp now, because you have 2 Zhongliangs. Flying Spot Tiger, Flying Mountain Tiger, it's like pay 0, give this card flying, deal 200 to yourself. That's 2 will right there off of the single red to play the card. Like other instances like that. In some cases, you can go quote-unquote infinite. It would just, you would die before your opponent would, but with a card like Magical Arrow, which adds itself back to your hand, you get 2 will every time you damage yourself, so you spend 1 to deal 100 to your opponent, 1 to deal 100 to your face, you generate 2 will, and you can just do that infinitely. However, you would just die before your opponent. So Zhongliang opens up so much more. It opens up space that basically, with the advent of like the Mylest bans and things like that, it just opens up those venues for like red deck wins type deals. But in most cases, it's just you generate so much free will. It's very funny how they've been adding all this like free will generation to red, and then suddenly red becomes like a really good color. It's almost like cheating will is the best thing to do in Force of Will. So like with like Artemis on the list, Zhongliang on the list, like all that stuff. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. It's just the potential for what Zhongliang can do is very, very high. So I'll be interested to see if anybody comes up with anything, like any aggro Brunhild lists or other stuff like that. Again, it's still good in Dragonflame. But yeah, that is why Zhongliang comes in at number 6, right? Othris was 10, Echidna is 9, Artemis is 8, Regalia Beast is 7, Zhongliang is 6. Yeah, so a number 6 slot. All right, coming in at number 5, Mechanized Water Soldier. Okay, so why Mechanized Water Soldier? So I've talked about this card a lot in like my reviews and things like that. They gave machines so much because they made Typhon like all machines, and then a lot of Dragonflame stuff is all machines, and so on and so forth. So they really amped up machines. And we've had a lot of machine synergy in the past. It's probably the most supported race, thinking about it. But so it has remove this card in your grave from the game, produce a blue, spend this will only to play machines. In the past, machines have also primarily been either Void Will or Blue Will. With Machina and Alice Origins, it was blue-green. With Violet recently, it was blue-red, and now it's blue-darkness. It's kind of just gone into every single color except light at this point. So with this, but blue has kind of always been the predominant one, right? Like if you look at this, we have blue-darkness, blue-green, blue-red. Like blue is just the main color for machines. Just mono blue machines with like Valhalla, right? So the blue will is fairly decent. Also, it has a Union 7 machine, which Union 7 is if we have 7 different unique named machines in all public zones or revealed from outside the game, we get Union 7, which now we produce 3 blue will. So the thing with all public zones means that your ruler area also counts. So if you're playing a ruler like Violet, like Arthur, like I don't think Alice Origins Machina is a machine on his front. I think it's a human, but so like anyway, like those rulers, you already start off with one unique name. So that is something to keep in mind. The other thing with Mechanized Water Soldiers specifically, and spoiler, you'll see some of these cards on the other list, being 2 will is a very decent spot to be in. It allows for a lot of combo play lines with some of the other cards that we have. And then, like again, because it's Union 7 and producing will, harvesting season type style decks with, like, for example, Arthur could lead to very like high ceiling combo style strategies for machines. I haven't played around with that space a whole lot yet. I've been busy doing other stuff, but the potential for Mechanized Water Soldier, because again, it's just removing itself from the grave in order to give you this will. So it's effectively cheating will, which strongest thing in Force will. So the potential for Mechanized Water Soldier is incredibly high, which is why it takes the number 5 spot. Also, just how generic it is overall, which is why it's higher than the other stuff. Coming in at number 4, Mechanized Fenrir. So there are a couple things with Mechanized Fenrir. One, its Revolution effect. So non-machine J resonators your opponent controls lose all abilities. This includes enters, any continuous effects that are attached to those cards specifically. So if it was attached to something like, you know, how Belial gives tokens +2/+2, they would still retain that, but they would lose Bane. So that is something that is interesting. But so it's kind of works as like a stun card. So if you take a deck like the turn 0 Loki deck, that's kind of been cropping up. Like this is a pretty decent floodgate for that, for like other following turns and things. Very bad against Typhon, right? Because it's all machines. But and it also has, you can play this card from outside the game as long as it's revealed by playing or by paying a single darkness rather than the 2. The blue and the 1. The thing with that is we've seen a huge uptake in Origin of the 7 lands due to some of the other cards that exist within Typhon, in order to have us get reveal effects, right? For reveal from outside the game effects, because Origin is the most generic one overall. So that is a way to get stuff easily revealed. Mechanized Fenrir also has the when it's destroyed, you can search your deck for a machine, reveal it, and put it into your hand. The important part about that text is it doesn't specify any kind of typing. So it doesn't say machine resonator, machine chant, machine addition, anything like that. It just says machine. So anything that has that trait or race can be searched. So cards like Mechanized Water Soldier, cards like Machine Lab of Legionus, cards like Maribel Type 0, cards like Mechanization, which is a machine chant. If you're playing Typhon, right, because you can play this card from outside the game in Typhon, and then you kill it with other types of effects, or your opponent kills it or anything like that, you can search for Typhon's blood, because it's a machine. You can search for echidnas. There's a whole lot that you can do with Mechanized Fenrir because of just how generic this search is, in addition to it just being a floodgate. So if it is revolutioned and you're not playing, right, like a mirror match, so if I'm playing against Zeus, right, and I'm a Typhon player and I have a ordered Fenrir against Zeus, odds are your opponent is going to want to kill it. So you don't even have to go out of your way to kill the Mechanized Fenrir. You will just eventually get that search, unless of course they stifle it with like a Lorite or whatever. But it's just, it is a very, very strong card for what it does. It synergizes very well with itself. It has the beast typing, one of the other most supported typings or traits, races. Mechanized Fenrir is just very good for stuff like that. And then Mechanization, which, spoiler, it's the next card, has a lot of potential, like combo potential with Mechanized Fenrir, because you get kind of like a 2-for-1 off of Mechanization. You can search your deck for more Mechanized Water Soldiers, and then put a Machine Lab of Legionus into play, res the Fenrir that you just got rid of, and then kind of keep going. So, but that is why Mechanized Fenrir comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, Mechanization. So, Mechanization, kind of just talked about it. You destroy a machine J resonator you control, and if you do, you can search your deck for a machine, non-chant machine. So this includes additions, this includes Regalia, with total cost equal to the total cost of the card destroyed this way, and then you put 6+1/+1 counters on it and shuffle your deck. The reveal from outside the game effect doesn't super matter. They're better draw cards for Typhon for reveal, and I don't think you'd play this outside of Typhon in the sideboard. You'd probably just play 4 in the main, or just not have any boarded. The 6+1/+1 counters on it is actually super interesting, because counters can go on like anything. I'm fairly certain. I'm pretty sure you can put +1/+1 counters on additions. I don't see a reason why you can't, even though they don't have stats. But I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure you can. The thing with it is the 6+1/+1 counters works very well with the old Valhalla stuff. So like with Arthur's cards and things like that, because like Lancelot has like a board wiping effect to remove, I think it's either 6 or 7, I think, +1/+1 counters. Cards like Guinevere from that set can do the same type of thing. Move around counters or sack stuff to gain counters, things like that. Vivian lets you remove counters in order to rest things. So they're just pretty prevalent effects that revolve around +1/+1 counters. The main thing being the search effect. So like I said earlier with Fenrir, is if you play Mechanization on a Mechanized Fenrir, you could search another Mechanized Fenrir. That is something that you can do, or you can search a like a Machine Lab of Legionus, resurrect the Mechanized Fenrir, and then if you have like another Mechanization, so the combo line here are the combo lines, right? So you have a Mechanized Fenrir in play, you Mechanization the Mechanized Fenrir, you add to your hand off the Mechanized Fenrir another Mechanization because it's a machine, and then you search Machine Lab of Legionus to kill the other Mechanized Fenrir. Then you can use a Mechanization on the Machine Lab of Legionus. It'll destroy the Machine Lab, and then you can get another Machine Lab. And if you have a Guinevere, the 1-drop Guinevere already in play, you have the Guinevere Infinite. So off of just 2 cards, basically, well, 3, I guess. One Mechanized Fenrir, 1 Mechanization, and a Guinevere. You can kind of just kill your opponent, right? So there's a lot of potential for machines, and again, if you have harvesting season to get mechanized water soldier or easy ways to dump or things like that, it just becomes very cyclical, and it becomes very easy for you to hit like counts and things like that. The other thing is Heart to Heart Talk Maria Bella. The improved healing robots can put mechanized water soldiers back in your grave in order to get even more will, and now you can play Maria Bella's Works to draw more cards and like other things like that. So machines just have a lot going for them right now, so I'd be very interested in someone, if someone made like a machine deck, brought it to either the GP in July or any of the other events, like online events or otherwise, that we might be having in the near future. Coming in at number 2. I don't think anyone's really surprised about this. Maybe they thought this would be in number 1, but Drywing, Mechanized Wind of Destruction. So Drywing, as I kind of alluded to earlier, works very well with Origin of the Seven Lands. Drywing is very strong in Typhon, just generically, but Origin makes it strong everywhere. So with Typhon, you can play Echidna, reveal like 2 of these, get 2 will back. You could reveal even a 3rd off of the Typhon flip, because Echidna has to be revolutioned, so the odds are you are also flipping off of Typhon. So if you reveal 3, now you suddenly have 3 will, off of just paying 1 will. So it's a quasi mana ramp in that sense. The other thing is it has a kind of like, it has a continuous field like floodgate effect. So your opponent can only produce will from stones. So it counters stuff like Zhongliang, like Mechanized Water Soldier, like the things that we've already seen from earlier. In the past, it would have, I mean, I guess it still can, but it can stop the will production off of like Mylest. If people are playing Mylest Almerius, Mylest at 0. I think those are the only 2 legal combinations. If it was New Frontiers, this stops Carlina. It stops Feasting. It stops any mana dork like Regalia Beast. So it just stops a bunch of different ways of producing will. It stops all of IU in like order decks, so that's funny. But it is just a very, very strong, very slow the game down type deal with its continuous effect. The other thing is with Origin of the Seven Lands, it is a mana ramp once per turn, because you can only activate Origin once per turn. With Origin, you reveal it, you produce the single green will off of the Origin reveal, and then you recover the stone that you tapped into it in order to use. So it just makes every deck, I wouldn't say require Origin. There are probably some decks that I wouldn't play Origin in, but there are quite a few that I still would. Like, for example, like Zeus, I can still play a 1 of Origin and have 4 Drywing in my sideboard to keep revealing all of them. It allows me to recover the 1, right? So, like, I can produce, like, if I have 2 stones, I can filter, like, if I have a Magic Stone and Moonshade, I filter Moonshade into Origin, tap to produce 2 will for New 12 Olympian Gods, reveal Drywing, if I tap like the 1, reveal Drywing, recover the 1, produce 2 more will for New 12 Olympian Gods, and now suddenly I'm at 5 will, 1 green will, and then 4 specifically for New 12 Olympian Gods. So it just has a lot of application for effects like that. I don't think we have a lot of stones with like other random tap effects. I could be wrong about that, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. Would have been really like almost too strong with like Zhongliang and things like that, right? Zhongliang, Null Magic Stone, like that whole interaction. So Drywing just opens up a lot with that interaction with Origin. Wouldn't be surprised if Origin Drywing became a combination ban. As a matter of fact, do it, but on the next list. But yeah, so that is why Drywing is in the number 2. It's very generic. Almost every deck I've made is playing it in like some kind of form, because there's almost no reason not to. And then, because the other thing with Origin is a will ability, so it's not even cancelable. You could stifle the effect of Drywing to recover a stone, but it just allows you to, because you're ramping a will for free, albeit specifically a green will, it allows you to kind of play more proactively, and not really be too afraid of like cancels or things or stifles or things like that, right? So that is why Drywing takes the number 2 spot. To go along with Drywing, I guess before we get into the number 1, if people don't already know what it is, but the Decay of the Machines, I don't have it pulled up, but Decay of the Machines, it is a single darkness quick cast, put up to 2 cards revealed from outside of the game into its owner's grave and then draw a card. Very good to counter Drywing. Also works very well with like Typhon cards and things like that. Decay was actually on this list when I had first recorded it. I thought I had 10 cards, but in reality I had 11, and Decay was the 11th. So Decay got the axe. So, but Decay just has some very good application for Drywing for other things like that. So I just wanted to briefly mention it. But coming in at number 1, if you couldn't already guess it, it's Persephone, the 11th Olympian. So Persephone has, for her enter, you destroy a J Resonator, and if you do, you draw a card. So it's just very good value on a destruction effect. And then it also has, you can pay either Darkness or Wind. If you pay Darkness and discard Persephone from your hand, you can remove a card in the grave from the game. Very good for Reanimator type effects, for things that, I mean, maybe your opponent's trying to save Mechanized Water Soldier for later in the game. You could remove it. Excuse me. The whole Zhongliang thing that we just talked about, resing it with Iron Hurriar Summon, very good for Persephone to just remove it from the game. Things like that. Or you can pay a single Wind Will, discard this, return target spell to its owner's hand. Very similar to Welser. However, Welser, not like Persephone. So Welser required you to be playing 6 Sages, because you had to recover a 6 Sage in order for his last lecture to be put him into play. So I mean, he saw play in like Carlina and other things like that, but it was pretty limited in the decks that it could be played in. Persephone just requires you to be in Tails, so like you can't play villains, but you can play Persephone in pretty much any deck and have that same type of effect. The main thing with Persephone that is important, and this is true with Welser as well, is that Persephone is always valued down, because you give the card back to your opponent instead of just canceling it outright. So you do pay will, typically will neutral or will positive. However, you do play value down, which is why return spells aren't always that great. However, they're very, very good in combo decks that could have trouble getting through like cancels and things like that, right? Because like with the combination bans, you can't play Persephone and Lorite in the same deck, and you can't play Fair's spell and Setting the Stage in the same deck. But if I'm playing a combo deck, I am more than likely going to be playing Setting the Stage, and I guess it depends on if I need a stifle or just an easily more like bounceable like for spells type deal in the deck. I would be playing Persephone or Lorite. Or because Persephone also has the remove target card in a grave, works very well to stop Athenia loops, like other things like that. So Persephone just has a lot of applicability for these like potential combo tempo oriented style decks that we didn't really have in such a generic fashion before. It was more relegated to specifically Carlina or for Welser, outside of like 6 Sages, right? So all the decks at the time were 6 Sages, so we were seeing a lot of Welser or just Carlina decks. But now with all of that banned, we haven't seen Welser crop up since, the last time it was being played was Mylest Moostark combo, right? But now that, but since we have like Persephone, right? and we were already in Tails, you could have argued to put Persephone into the deck, also partially because his last lecture in Welser is stoppable via Fair's spell, and Lorite, whereas this, the effect of Persephone, is purely stoppable off of Lorite or other stifle effects. The thing with Persephone over Welser, you could just play as like a 6/6 body. It's funny that they have the same stat line too. You could just play as a 6/6 body for a singular wind will with his last lecture. Persephone, you would have to pay 2 for in order to actually play, and she's sorcery speed, not quick cast. Her Union 7 is less impactful. The interesting thing about her Union 7, from my perspective personally, is more the destroy target J Resonator you control and J Resonator your opponent controls. It facilitates a lot of flipping back and forth for order rulers that might not potentially have access to that, as long as they're at the Union 7 for New 12 Olympian Gods. So that being said, you would have to play 7 different named New 12 Olympian Gods in the same deck to get access to that effect. She does also have the buff effect, but that's less prevalent in my opinion. But the destruction effect, in order to kind of, again, facilitate flipping back and forth for maybe something like, I don't know, Kaguya, I guess. Or like other things like that. Zeus, I mean, Zeus you want to flip back and forth all the time, but he kind of already does that on his own. But so those, it's just a interesting type of effect, and it is technically a form of removal as well. But yeah, so anyway, that is the top 10 for Game of Gods Revolution, my top 10. Feel free to let me know any cards that you think I might have missed, any cards that you think would be your top 10 down in the comments section below. And then next week, I don't know, I'm out of town, so I don't think I'll be doing anything on Monday. However, I do have a video planned for Thursday, just basically another video outside of just the typical the new deck building series for the new rulers, as well as the Wander Wednesday that we typically do. So do look forward to that. I am trying to release all my videos at 3 p.m. PST on the days that I actually am uploading, so keep an eye out around that time frame from now on into the future. I will post on my Twitter in the future if I do expect it to go a little later, or if I don't think I can get it out that day. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.